So we
Thanks,
should,
Dan.
yeah, no worries. So we're recording, and I'll send instructions on how to do that in case nobody wrote that down, but it's pretty easy. And I'll send this out to everybody when it's done as a YouTube link. So yeah, can you guys maybe start us off by like what questions do you guys have? What wonders, what do you wonder about what we're doing, or maybe it doesn't even have to be a question. It can be if you know a little bit about Planetwalk already. It can be kind of an idea or an experience that you've had that you feel like connects to what we're doing. But a question might help kick off the conversation a little bit.
I'd be interested in hearing kind of the what you started off with in terms of like some of the big challenges that you've been facing so far, and also some of the successes that you've had so far. Like, what have been the aha moments, the jump points, as we like to call them?
Yeah, so we can talk about that maybe from all of our different perspectives. We're also joined by Andy. Come on over. Also joined by one of the Greentown International, actually the head of the Greentown International Division, Andy Falshaw. He's from Australia, but's been living in China and Japan and maybe a few other places, the UK, for a bit. Has a daughter who's just about the same age as Elia. So we've become good friends, and Andy's sort of joined on board Planetwalk to see if we can get Greentown involved, and so I'm really thankful for that. So we can all maybe share a little bit. I'll share. I know the sort of first jump point for me probably came after last March's Planetwalk. So we took 11 students from CIS on a project week trip at the end of March of this year, and about 5 teachers came along, and Dr. Francis came and joined us for that walk, which was a lot of work. That was a huge challenge to sort of put that project week together. But a couple of things happened after that walk. One, as I was looking through student feedback and talking to the student participants, I was just really amazed at the variety of experience that the students had. So just the difference from one student to the next in terms of what they really took away from the experience, how they were really able to create their own learning journey in that space, and how even though it was very lightly facilitated, just the fact that they were allowed to go out and explore in the way that Planetwalk asked them to explore, they naturally came up with a lot of questions and a lot of ideas, and cool ways of re-seeing the world, of sort of reimagining how they could interact and how other people thought, and so on. One particular example came in what we called the Planet Talks, when one of the students who participated, his name was Kenny, he talked about, even though he had been in China for almost a year at that point, he said, I still held on to this idea that Chinese people, and it's an offensive idea, but that Chinese people are largely rude, uninterested in other people, and uncompassionate, and I think he might have even used the word uncivilized. He's a teenager, so he has to be forgiven for some of those views, I think. But he said, for the first time, I saw Chinese people in a totally new light. So Kenny was Korean, he's South Korean, growing up in Hong Kong, and walking through a part of China that he otherwise never would have visited, wouldn't have even driven through, let alone walked through. And his experience showed him, in his own words, that things weren't the way that he thought they were. And so I just realized that this was a really excellent opportunity to sort of help bring. This is a quality that I think is really important to foster in people, the ability to sort of see the world in such a way that they stop seeing it the way that they think it is, and they start seeing it for all of the many possibilities that exist. And I thought Kenny was doing that. And then another one for me was just the incredible amount of support that we got from, and interest that we got from both the Chinese community and the international community. People seemed really connected to, one, this sort of environmental initiative, right, that we're engaging young people and thinking about how to make the environment better. And I realized they're still thinking about the environment in a very particular way. as kind of like air quality, water quality, how are ecosystems doing, rivers and trees and, you know, wildlife, you know, things like that. And that John's message, which goes further than that view of environment, to sort of suggest that we are the environment and that humans need to focus on how we treat one another. That message really, I thought, was a powerful message based on my experiences in the world and also definitely here in China. So for me, those are a couple, and those aren't directly tied to this conference, but they provided some inspiration and motivation to try to push forward to see where we could take Planetwalk. Andy or Austin, you guys want to share kind of when a moment you had when you said, "Oh wow, Planetwalk, this is what we're trying to do, and this is the maybe another challenge that we faced in trying to do it."
There will probably be other things I can think of when I look back on my experiences kayaking and walking. But last night, when Nick, one of the Chinese participants, when he spoke and it was translated into English, I thought that was a pretty big thing. And I could tell when he was speaking in Chinese that he started off slowly and measured, but he built up, and I could see he was quite passionate. And then when it was translated, I was like, wow, that's big, that's huge. So he talked about Chinese people always, education being always in a certain way in a classroom, learning this particular style. And he just thought the idea of there's got to be a better way, getting outside, being amongst nature. He wanted to do things differently. And he had big ideas of, getting this, maybe not thinking about getting this to work first, but he was, wanted to go straight into, I've kayaked here, I've paddled here, I want to go over and spread this message in America, I want to, go to these different places, South America, I want to make it global. So I remember listening to that thinking, wow, if one person can be impressed with this in perhaps, 6 to 12 months of exposure to the idea, that he can see another way.
Nick, the guy that Andy's talking about, is quite an influential person here in Hangzhou, this small rural community. He runs Coastlines Kayak and is considered one of the leaders in the community. I mean, Coastlines Kayak is really the only significant business in Hangzhou. And I think one of the things that Andy's drawing on is that Nick viewed, just to extend that a little bit, because it was a huge jump point last night. I think Nick's gone from trying to run a business successfully on the island to really trying to leave a significant positive mark on the island, really try to help the community grow in really positive ways, both in regards to education and also in regards to the environment. So to go from someone working very hard to put together a successful small business in a rural community, which is not easy, but to then see their purpose shift to something even, I don't want to say bigger, but I mean, I think to me cooler, and just,
More with the instincts.
yeah, just like, this is more than just you're doing so much more than just running a kayak base. And yeah, I think that definitely a jump point. I agree with that. It's cool.
Yeah. The first one I'll talk about built on that, and that was the very first night, the kind of opening facilitation we had. It was quite a big group. It was about 20 people. And engagement was either a little bit low or at times superficial. And that like was a challenge for us too. I think we could have done a lot more in preparing for that and expecting that and facilitating it better. But regardless, there was a lot of people were on their phones, a lot of people had side conversations. The linguistic challenges was hard too. I think we could have thought more about how to do English and Chinese so that people felt more included. And so like it was an all right kind of opening to the walk, I guess, and we got some reflections around these 4 words of listen, wonder, creating Connect. We asked people to share things from the first day around those. And there were some kind of interesting things there. But then last night, we had a lot of the group of the paddlers as well, who are all Chinese, come. And they were really very, very engaged. And part of it is Nick is a pretty charismatic guy, and they look up to him a lot too. But they also, I think, were really willing to present, and start co-creating rather than being participants in something that we had designed. At one point, they talked about like, oh, we should find a way that Dan and these guys can help us get funding so we can fly to the States and we can go kayaking in the States. And I replied and I was like, well, we're trying to figure out funding too. So it's not really something we can help you with. Like at some point we need to be able to rely on ourselves, and we'd love your guys' input. And they just went at it. They were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Let's start thinking about how we can make this sustainable then. And that was just like a really cool level of engagement last night.
It has been a cool shift to watch. We had eight Chinese gentlemen who signed up to paddle as part of a project alongside Planetwalk, and they were invited to participate in the conference, but I don't think they really knew what to expect. And I wasn't communicating with them directly. Nick was communicating with them. And I think their entry point was, hey, we get to paddle for a week, and we love to paddle, and that's cool. And yeah, we care about the environment too. That's great. But I think now their attention has shifted to how can we grow out of this, and how can we help our communities grow out of this, and looking at the possibilities through education and so on. I think it's been to watch their shift from Monday to Thursday, because one of the biggest challenges, and Austin mentioned the linguistic aspect of it, but it's also runs, as you guys know, runs so much deeper, is how do you bring sort of these two cultural groups together, really more than two also, because we have to remember that even our international participants, like we come from somewhat different cultures. Even within China, people have their own sort of distinct subcultures. So it's a really diverse group, and the bilingual nature of it is incredibly challenging. But I think even more challenging is how do we engage the Chinese perspective in this? I think for me, thinking about without making it a very sort of stereotypical Chinese event, because it's not. I mean, having a walking and paddling learning journey design conference is not anybody's normal kind of event. So to do that, how do you still draw them into that space so that they feel comfortable, they feel like co-creators, and we're ready to listen to that. We've prepared ourselves for that. It's been a really hard challenge. Something that's enjoyable, but all equally frustrating. So, yeah, those are some of the, I think, key challenges and some of the key jump points. Do you guys think of other challenges we could throw at them before we open it up for more questions?
One that links into that is I don't think it's just in the Chinese context, but thinking generally about how you have a design conference that doesn't have set outcomes, and how you explain that to people, so that it's not like, this is the central question, as aside from we are the environment. There's some kind of vague theme there, but there's not sort of like, this is our objectives for it. So when people ask, what is it? How do you answer that?
It's a bit nebulous.
It's a bit nebulous, and especially in China, that's more difficult, but I don't think it's anything to do with China necessarily.
It's
I
difficult.
think everyone has trouble with that, and that's not a fault of theirs either. I think that's something we need to work on as well, is how to find a way to explain something that we want to be intentionally nebulous. Like Sarah, a counterpart of mine from Avenues, is from New York campus, is here actually as part of this, and we're thinking about how to incorporate it in. And they, for her, she was like, I want to connect it to a course. Like, that's the way to do it, is I'm going to go back and talk to the science teachers on how to connect it to a course. And I think that's great for sure. But at the same time, my view of Planetwalk is I wouldn't want it to just be like a field trip for a course or something like that.
It has the potential to.
It has the potential to, but I don't want it to be like, oh, here's our learning objectives for the course, here's the exam at the end. We'll take a nice break right before spring holiday to give students a break or something like that. So thinking about how to keep it open and keep it co-created, but maintain some solid identity as well.
Austin and I had another interesting related chat today about the nebulous nature of Planetwalk, in that because it is intentionally open-ended and we do actually want Planetwalk to apply to everybody, and we do want you to enter, we want people who are interested in exploring the possibility that they can develop themselves, that they can pursue goals, that they can solve problems, that they can create new things, and that walking and experiencing the world is actually a great medium for thinking and creating along those lines. We want that to be for anyone and everyone, but when you open that up, there's so many possibilities we're encountering, even for, I think, for ourselves. As soon as I start thinking I'm kind of comfortable with the possibilities that exist for Planetwalk, somebody presents a new one. I say, oh, I hadn't thought of that yet. So I realized that, wow, there's so many directions, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. And that's okay. I think that's important and good, but I think that we have to, that they're not comfortable with it. But I think that we have to think about how you facilitate in that and how you design and structure something in that uncomfortable of a space. I think most good learning, most really awesome stuff is going to happen in an uncomfortable space. But a lot of times uncomfortable space turns into empty space because people just kind of run and hide from it and give up on it. And so we have to think about that. So yeah, we haven't given you guys a lot of concrete things in terms of what Planetwalk is, but hopefully that helped articulate some of our experience. Are you guys throwing a question out? I can't hear that if someone's asking something.
Coco's taking the call on the other.
Oh.
Team China, do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Today, I just have a question about how the open mind technology has been working. Just to hear more about how the students have been engaging with the Planetwalk in general. Because last year I walked for a couple of days and I observed some of the students, and some of them decided to not talk, some of them decided to talk, and they only had their notebooks last year. And I'm just wondering, how the open mind technology has been going and how that engagement is displayed, or just reflections on that.
I think it's a really important question, and my first, I'll answer first if these guys don't mind. I don't think we've done enough exploration of what open mind technology is. I think today was kind of our first chance to maybe think that we've encouraged ourselves to think about it. Obviously on Tuesday we had students walking out with their smartphones in hand, attempting to make maps with fairly clear parameters on particular software. They had iPads that were provided by the school. We've been playing around with something called Makey Makeys as well with the students, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do some inventing with them tonight. It's a tool that just meant to sort of spark creative thinking, and it's very portable. So we thought, maybe this will fit somewhere in Planetwalk, but didn't have sort of any clear ideas on how. What I saw with the students on Tuesday was actually pretty magical. I think for me, watching students engage. I felt like everyone was engaged in either exploring this Makey Makey tool that we had asked them to play with, or with really focusing on putting their photos and their videos together to create a story using the mapping software that we're using, a tool from Esri called Story Maps. And hopefully we'll have an example to show you guys at the end of the week, and you guys can kind of see what we've experienced this week. And yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited about open mind technology. I think people have thrown around a couple of ideas, but we don't. Our current technologies, in my opinion, tend to get in the way. They tend to distract. It's really hard to have to pull out an iPad or pull out a phone and stay connected to the world around you at the same time. And so Dr. Francis came up with an idea, maybe off the top of his head. He might have thought about it earlier, but he often walks with a walking stick when he's walking. He's 68 years old. He's been walking his whole life. And he said, what if just the end of my walking stick was turned into a probe, right? And you had kind of you had sensors built into the walking stick that could collect all of this data on the world around you as you walked. So you could easily put it into the water, or it could record temperature variations, or it could record maybe ground pollution levels, a lot of different possibilities, right? But it's something that you don't really have to think about. And that's what, the open mind technology piece, that's really where I'm hoping the conversation around Planetwalk goes, is not so much what did we do this trip, because I don't think we've done that much that's really interesting. I think the mapping will be the most interesting outcome of that. And I think it actually required a little bit of closed-minded, kind of like, okay, I've got to take my iPad out and I've got to take a picture of the world. And I think that in some ways that having that device have to be so obvious and so apparent in your use of it, I think in some ways it takes away from the experience. So I'm a little bit frustrated by the technologies that currently exist, but I think playing around with development of some applications and maybe some other hardware, we can create a way for students to, one, sort of sense the world without having to think about it too much. So actually capture their experience, including their questions, including what's going on in their minds, without having to overtly do so much other than explore. And then I really hope that we don't forget that there's non-digital technologies that are great for opening minds. One thing that Dr. Francis does that I always think, man, I wish I would do that. So he'll just sit down and he'll make a short sketch and he'll get his watercolors out and he'll paint a little bit in his journal, even just on a 5 or 10 minute break. And I think that kind of engagement with the world around you.
And then he geotags it.
And then, so the problem is like, how do we geotag that? And maybe Makey-Makeys could help, because you could just alligator clip to the painting, and then you could somehow just plug it into your, I don't know.
I think you could just take a photo of it.
So
you love Makey-Makeys for anything.
One of the challenges that we've been having is with the mapping is we want to geotag, and for some reason geotagging things is just it's ridiculous, because you have to actually go through the process of being like, okay, I'm going to take a photo, or I'm going to create some file that has this geotag. And we want to figure out a way to get that file without having to think about getting it, so that all of the Planetwalkers' experience is geotagged. I think that'll be a big step forward in open mind technology. That, combined with encouraging people to use non-digital, like not necessarily digital technologies.
I would add on to that also thinking about, and this goes back to when we were with the students on Tuesday, and a few other things, but thinking about when and why one uses that technology as well. Like for Tuesday, we had an assignment for the students to take photos that fit the theme of the conference. And I was in the group that got down first, and we got out basically 2 hours early. They ran essentially a significant amount of the trail, unfortunately. And when we came out to the road at the end, one of the coach mentors reminded them. They were like, "Oh, remember you have this assignment." And so there was a moment of like 10 minutes when they all like scattered and took a bunch of photos to fulfill the assignment, and then came back together and we walked and finished the trail. And so I think that also goes to thinking about how to make the use of those technologies authentic, I guess, or that they're used in a way that solves some problem and isn't fulfilling an assignment. Or if it is fulfilling an assignment, there's some really meaningful learning that comes from it. And I think that's a challenge and something to think more about how they're used. The other thing that has come up as a theme repeatedly is just a lot of these things in China are either difficult, like Google Maps, or could potentially, I mean, there's like 20 of us here now, if that, which is fine. But if this were to get bigger, could potentially be really sensitive. I remember talking to the head of IIE, the president of IIE, a guy named Alan North, I think. I don't remember his last name. And he was like a big thing. What is it?
Alan Goodman.
Goodman. And a big thing he was talking about, they have a big academic protection part of IIE, is kind of naive scientists who publish a paper on water quality in some area and so end up getting heavily persecuted by the government and harassed and wanting to be thrown in jail, and they have to help them leave the country, basically.
So guys, if you could set aside a fund, like just a bail Dan out of Chinese jail fund, I'd appreciate that. That'd be great support from Jump. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I know you're on it. No, those are really good points by Austin. I didn't, the reality is that this conference would be easier almost anywhere else in the world, and certainly dealing with open mind technology, it would be easier anywhere else in the world. But I think that's cool that we're doing it here, and I think that we do have some Chinese partners who are willing to help, and hopefully we can get government agencies and other people on board so that the thing that we're doing, because we're not, Planetwalk is not about protesting, it's not about, exposing anybody. We're not actually trying to write a report on things, but the kinds of information that we're collecting could easily be seen as sensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
And other people could take that information, because we do want to be so open about it and do what they want with that information. So that is an issue as well. But in terms of like the individual learner's experience, I think Austin hit on a really good point is, how do you not force engagement? And technology should disappear, and that's really the focus. How do we make the technology disappear? How do we make it so that people are authentically engaging with the world around them, exploring, and that experience is being captured? Because even those boys, when they're running the trail, their minds weren't empty. How do we get access to what's going on in their heads? Well, you're not going to slow them down long enough to take a picture of something with their iPad or with their smartphone sometimes. So, you're going to have to find another way to do it. We need another tool. And so we've talked about some crazy ideas and some practical ideas on what we could do, but that conversation is really just beginning. So if Jump wants to support with that ongoing conversation and be a part of it, we'd really appreciate that. I mean, obviously you guys are great thinkers, have really great ideas, and it would be fun to see in Jump programs even, right? Because so much of our Jump programs don't get captured. We don't harness what actually happens in those programs, because if we did try, the program would end up suffering, because the current technologies don't allow for that authentic engagement. So I think there's a mutual interest there, right? I think how can we capture this? How can we extend people's learning, increase their engagement in what they're doing, but still capture it, still get a sense of what's happening, and be able to share that with other people and so on. So it's a good question, May. Sorry for the really long answer.
Oh.
Just kidding.
Love it. Thanks.
We're still there. The screen recording will have a short shot of my calendar because it just popped up by accident. It's okay.
Another question, and then this is maybe more question, conversation, discussion, is Green Long March. Have you guys connected to that movement at all?
So we have
heard about it.
We have connected to it in the sense that we have heard about it, and some of the organizers have been introduced to me and John Francis, and we're interested in talking with them. I think the most we actually tried last weekend. John had a chance to go up last Sunday to Beijing and spent the day at the Jane Goodall Roots and Shoots Summit. Got a chance to meet with Jane Goodall and some of the JGI Roots and Shoots team, and we were hoping we could meet with one of the founders of the Green Long March. But I think, yeah, I think there are definitely some parallels.
Well, parallels, and also they faced some like huge challenges as well. So it's just, I think, following their challenges or their failures of where to move forward and navigate. Frances Fremont Smith, who's on our board, actually ran the Green Long March before she was fired. And before Future Generations was kind of like kicked out of Beijing. So she may be a good person to also connect with. But
Cool. No,
they were huge, right? They had programs running in like almost every province. They had, I think, 1,000 universities province walking. I think, I don't know enough about them, but I think they're a much smaller operation now. But yeah.
And are they based
Some lessons maybe.
are they based in Hong Kong now?
I don't actually know, but I'll send an email after this call, just connecting you to Frances, and she at least insight around. It was huge, right? Like this summer, like 6 summers ago, before it was like almost every province had people walking, and they were like doing green education, and you got to recycle, and it was funded by Lenovo and funded by like massive funders behind it. But then a lot of their documentaries were showing like the negative side of industrialization and like economic growth and development, and it was like boom, shut down.
Yeah.
And province, I mean, the man went out like don't collaborate with Green Long March, and so they couldn't get any permits to do the walk or that. So that's just something to be aware of how quickly that can change.
Yeah.
That's that's the last time I heard about it was like 4 years ago, and I think so it's a good group to at least connect with as you guys start to scale up.
No, I agree. I think one of the things that I think about every time I have a conversation about Green Long March, one is why they choose that name, and two, I mean, I think maybe I understand why they choose that name, but I think it may have invited some of the challenges that they faced, and then two, I think that it's one of the important things about Planetwalk, and Austin and John and I were talking about this today, is really clearly identifying what is a Planetwalk, like what is it that you do, and there's a story behind Planetwalk that I think makes it a little bit unique from something like Green Long March, which is certainly a unique program in itself. But John's message is really, it's pacifist. It's not aggressive, and I know that Green Long March wasn't an aggressive protest against anyone in particular. But John's message is not even environmental in the same sense that the Green Long March had an environmental message. So it's an idea that we are the environment, and that since we are the environment and part of the environment, one of John's central messages is that the first step in even understanding what sustainability means is actually focusing on treating each other well. And that human-to-human interactions and those sorts of things are what, and granted, these questions and challenges are also politically sensitive in China.
He does use certain bad words.
Right. So
if
you talk about human rights in China, people's ears will get perked up. But I mean, the idea being that for us, or at least for me, I can't say for us, but my experience with Planetwalk has been interfacing with people that I never otherwise would have interfaced with, connecting with people that I never otherwise would have connected with, whether it's a sugarcane salesman or an old lady who's one of the last people remaining in her rural village, or it's a guy sort of pulling his water buffalo down the street, and it's mostly a sum of very short interactions, but they're almost all very positive. And in China, especially, that's not something that you hear coming out of a foreigner's mouth. wow, look at all the great positive interactions I had with a bunch of Chinese people today. You just don't hear that, but I think that you could, if we change the story, if we change the narrative a little bit. And so Planetwalk is as much about that as it is about recycling and reducing emissions and fixing pollution. It's about those things too, but it's not about, it's not aggressive in any way, and it starts with understanding, right? It starts with saying, this is how this place, and this is how these people, and this is how I am. And one of actually maybe an aha moment was on the first day when we sat down for lunch, and I had asked Wang Song, who you guys met earlier, or at least Justin met earlier, to bring us some lunch to where we were going to stop on that day. And he brings us lunch, and they're all typical box lunches in Chinese, and there's tons of plastic, and there's going to be just a heap of trash at the end. And I just thought, wow, what great planet walkers. Like, look at all this trash that we're making. Not even all the trash we're making. Like, look at all the trash I'm making just by myself. And I thought, that's that understanding of the fact that we're all a part of this together is something that I hope comes through. And so I hope that makes it, in response to some of the challenges that Green Long March has faced, I hope that it makes it somehow more acceptable here in China, easier to embrace on all fronts by both the Chinese community and also the, institutions like the Chinese government and stuff like that. What else do you guys got? What do you think about that?
Well, I think what's key to that is just the word choice. If you're using like the word harmony with the environment or harmony with interactions, that's like
I need to write that down.
they're not going to shut something down and send it on. That's my perspective that I kind of learned is harmony is a big catch-all, and that's a word that's used in like international relations and diplomacy by Chinese officials. So it's something that it does connotate that what you're talking about, the pacifist nature of it. We are growing into something, but we're going to do it by not turning it into a zero-sum game. So that's just my opinion on these things. Right? Instead of addressing human rights or environmental change, harmony.
No, I like that, and we've had that conversation as well. As like our word choice in English sometimes seems to make sense, but when we look at it in Chinese, we're like, it's just not quite right. Like it's not. We had someone say in the first night, our translation for this idea of wondering about things, essentially amounts to curiosity in Chinese, and asking a lot of questions. One of the paddlers says, in China, if you ask a lot of questions, everyone will think you are stupid. And so we're like, oh, okay. How do we get this? This is central to what we're trying to do. Essentially, one of the things we're trying to accomplish is create a map around the world of questions that people have. And there's going to be a big gap in China on that map if everyone thinks they look stupid when they ask a question. So we're kind of like, we're like, how do we turn this around? And it might be language use. It might also just be addressing that sort of mindset, which is, I think, another thing we're trying to do. But those two things go hand in hand. So it's, we've been talking about some Chinese quotes, for example, that actually, maybe they're from Confucius or Lao Tzu or, famous Chinese philosophers that can get people to realize, like, actually, Chinese culture does value asking questions, and it does value listening to other people in the way that we're talking about. So we do have to work out the language issues. I think that's key. It's a good insight. Harmony. I like that. Planetwalk, bringing harmony to all of China.
And then there's the photo issues.
Yeah.
But
And you could call it harmony. Big piles of trash.
Austin was just saying, well, there are issues with the photos.
I was being cynical.
If we take a bunch of photos of garbage and
Call it
smog and
harmony.
water pollution, and
Doesn't
we're like,
help.
look at the harmony, it's gonna. I don't know. It's a good point. How do you be honest and harmonize at the same time? It's a great challenge. What were you gonna say?
I also think that this is happening at a good time with this type of program, because it does seem like there is a movement, and there has been for a long time. Well, there's been a movement from the top down of trying to create a more of a liberal arts type of curriculum where you are exploring these ideas. And I think that there is, people, at least on the surface, are more receptive to those ideas. So things where you're leaving students the opportunity to go out and to make their own, to a degree, make their own learning experience while walking is something that I think is gaining traction with this movement towards liberal arts type of education. So I think they're trying to, it's a part of a bigger trend of trying to move to the next economic system, the next level of economic development for this idea generation. So I think that this is something that people may see, and that's one point of potential growth for it. So, and one way maybe that if you're talking to a government official, that it means something you can point out is like, this is very much giving them the chance to really innovate and to think about things and come up with ideas for solutions to problems and things like that. So just another 2 cents.
No, cool. I'm really appreciating your guys' insights, and I know you'd have to talk about this sort of organizationally, especially given the sensitivities we've just sort of brought up, but political sensitivities in China. But right now, one of the concrete sort of things that we've developed while being here that we would like to do moving forward is bring John Francis to Beijing in the spring to maybe do a probably not a full week, maybe a full week, but probably not a full week, Planetwalk in Beijing with some students in Beijing. And Austin, I think, will be taking the lead on that, but I think we'd really appreciate your guys' insights and help and support. Austin, of course, is back in Beijing now, so you guys, I'm sure, will be connected. But I'd love to see Jump kind of providing a lot of input and helping take Planetwalk forward in terms of developing both the curriculum, but also thinking about where it sits in the China context, the China's educational context, environmental context, political context. I think that would be a fun exploration for Jump to take on, and I know that we would certainly value your guys' opinions and thoughts on that.
Guys, Dan, I actually have to take off to go interview the Jins. How do you pronounce the guy's name?
I don't know.
No, you passed the guy's name on the Jin.
Oh, you pronounced it so poorly that I didn't know who you were talking about. You can call him Cash. It's Heist de Jong, but you can call him Cash. Cash Money.
Heist de Jong.
Call him Cash Money.
That's Jins. Oh, it's TJ. I'm so dyslexic. So, from an organizational perspective, Jump, macro level, this is definitely a project that aligns with our philosophy, and from Jump Global, we fully support it. And however we can, that's definitely it. The China team, May and Josh, from at least what I know about them, this is definitely in line with what they love and do, and I think it's in line with the strategic plan that they're driving forward. So in terms of the Beijing project and how it can be involved, I'll leave that to May and Josh to kind of make a decision around where that fits into things, and how the Beijing team can support it from a global capacity, wherever we can connect and provide resources or a sounding board. If we want to send stuff out to the global facilitator network, those are once we get a package from this, what happened, maybe circulating it to our whole network and contribute could be a good use from the global perspective. And I'll let May and Josh kind of speak to the China-centric or China-focused team of jumpers and how they can support. But I'm going to hop on this other call. It was nice chatting with you guys. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing more, Dan, especially when the program's done.
Yeah, thanks,
John,
guys.
trying to see.
See you next week, JB.
See you, JB. Thank you.
Guys.
We're China team. We're probably going to run soon as well because the dinner bell is calling. But do you guys have any other thoughts or questions that you'd like to share before we go?
What's I know you said that there weren't necessarily like solid outcomes of that nature, but like what are like the long term, like what do you see long term for these students or for all the participants who are looking now? Like you mentioned something in the spring, but like are these going to be the same with you, or are you hoping that they'll engage in different ways?
Cool. That's a really concrete. Oh, sorry. I think that's a really concrete question for me. My understanding and my hope has always been that the people that have participated in this learning journey design conference that we organized would then go out in the spring and would be the ones to help us organize, design and organize and facilitate, deliver Planetwalk learning journeys to students back in their communities. So looking to Austin to one, help design the experience that will take place in New York with the Avenues World School there, but also help in putting together some Beijing experience. We don't know quite exactly what that'll look like, but for students in Beijing. And then we'll also organize, we have several schools from Hangzhou, so 3 schools from, not necessarily 2 from Hangzhou, 1 from southern Anhui, and we're looking at connecting to create a Planetwalk here. John Francis will run another Planetwalk in Indiana with through his program at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So we have at least 4 Planetwalks taking place in the spring, and we want to use that as sort of the first iteration. So the outcome of this conference, we're hoping, is to create a team that can develop a resource that we can all use to design and deliver this Planetwalk learning journey to students in the spring. And then we're thinking that right now, the idea is that we'd go through another iteration. So based on what we do in the spring, we'll have a resource, hopefully a website, a platform for students to share their learning journeys via a map. And again, I'll share some examples of what that would look like with you guys when we're done with this week. And then go through the whole process again, inviting more educators, more environmentalists together, more community members together, probably next fall or in the late summer, and planning for another set of Planetwalks the following spring. So I'm envisioning kind of an annual cycle, at least for the first couple years until Planetwalk kind of gets off the ground and people feel comfortable kind of taking the resource that we've developed and running with it in multiple directions. That might happen sooner, or it might happen much later than I'm thinking. But and I'm open to either one. But that's kind of that's kind of how things are playing out in my mind at the moment. Austin, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to that is us through this helping clarify our vision for Planetwalk and what that is. And then part of the walks in the spring being really well documented and kind of well recorded prototypes in terms of success and failures to then really have a stronger push towards sustainable partners or sustainable funding or something like that. Like I haven't shared this with you, but kind of having a pitch deck potentially or something, being like, this is what we did, and this is where we want to go, and do you want to be a part of this with us?
Yeah, that looking at that organizational perspective, I mean, we're having conversations about, do we want to register an organization in China? What would that organization look like? You know, would we want to staff? What kind of staff? You know, so we're asking those kinds of questions as well. So in terms of like the bigger picture of what Planetwalk is, both as an experience and as an organization, I think, you know, a lot of that remains to be seen and depends a lot on what gets developed between now and next June, really. We're kind of in like a 6 month kind of prototyping phase, as Austin described it. Did that answer your question, Sam?
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool, guys. Sounds really exciting. Have a really awesome last day. Wish
Yeah.
we were there with you.
Yeah, we wish so too. It would have been nice. You guys ditched us to head up to the BJ. Appreciate that.
Not my choice.
I
Oh,
need to learn how to be that short and sweet.
I love you guys.
Not my choice.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Well, you guys keep up the great work, and thanks for taking some time out of your busy day. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. We can connect with Austin once he comes back up to Beijing.
Yep.
Yeah.
See you Saturday.
Cool.
Cool guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.